Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Jim Lauderdale. He's going to share a story about meeting George Jones.
I saw him a lot. Any chance I could get, I'd go see him. And when I was mentioning about the time I was in Nashville, the only time I believe I saw him in the 5 months, well, it was at the Opry a few times, and I'd have backstage. I'd be backstage, and once I went up to him after the show and introduced myself, and there was a guy there with a camera, and I got my picture with him, but I didn't exchange. I think I was too nervous. But George, it was during that period too where he was a little bit lit, but super nice. But I would just see him so many times and listen to so many records. And so whenever I'd see him, it was just like magic, he was so, one of the greatest singers ever, and of any style. And several years later, gosh, it was in 2001, I got a call to audition for this play that was about Tammy Wynette, and it was this musical. And so they were looking for somebody to play George Jones. And so I thought, darn it, I've got this record coming out in the fall on a new independent label called Dual Tone. It was a country record. But I went and auditioned and kind of had fun at the audition, and then they offered me the job. And it was they were having a preview and work out this thing at this place called the Flat Rock Playhouse in Flat Rock, North Carolina. And I had also worked there, coincidentally. I would go to that area every summer of my life. My dad was a Presbyterian, associate Reformed Presbyterian minister, and then worked for the church. And so they had their assembly grounds there. And then I wanted to someday have a health food store. So I approached the lady that had the snack bar at the Flat Rock Playhouse about working the next summer at her store. And she said, well, I don't need anybody there, but we could use you here at the Playhouse to cut the grass, help me in the concession stand, help the maintenance man. So I did that for 3 summers when I was in high school. So it was cool. They had the premiere of this show up there, and then it came to the Ryman, and I got to open for George a couple of times there at the Ryman during that run. We did it 2 years, and I got a message. There was a lady, Martha Detweiler, who was good friends with Tammy and knew George well. And she said, look, I want to have you over to the house, and George and Nancy will come for dinner. And so I was, talking about nerves there again. And George actually was another guy I wished I could have hung out with them more, but I didn't let myself kind of let that happen,
Was this because of your inhibitions?
Yes, it was because of my inhibitions. Yeah, he was super nice. So being there next to him at dinner, actually, several years before that, in 1988, I think it was, when I was living in California, I finally had gotten a record deal after years and years with Epic Records, and Pete Anderson, Dwight Yoakam's producer, started using me on Dwight's records as a harmony singer, and then produced this record for me. And unfortunately, the record didn't come out. It was a very Bakersfield country style record. But they called before things went south. They said, George is doing this duet record. And so I got to do a duet with him. And so that was, just, I was so nervous, but it was great too. And then that got shelved for years, and then it finally came out. And he was still alive when this record came out, but it was a record of duets that hadn't been released. And Keith Richards is on there, and some Tammy stuff, and Georgette, and a bunch of folks.
And you did your vocal. Was he there?
Yeah, we were like, kind of did it at the same time. Not the same mic, but
what did that feel like?
It was really intimidating, but at the same time, challenging. I had pitched him a lot of things, and Billy Sherrill produced it, and he was super nice. And Billy was also portrayed in this musical. It was kind of the thing where the band, everybody in the band played a character. And so there was this great steel player named Kevin Owens that kind of looked like Billy Sherrill. And he had never acted before, but he was great as Billy Sherrill. And so Nancy, George's wife, said, now listen, when you are pitching George songs, if he doesn't like it, he's going to start sucking on his teeth. And you're going to know. That's so I would be like, here's one, and hand him. And the other thing too is when we got in there, I had like I guess CDs were out there. I had a CD, I guess, of songs to pitch him. And then they're like, where's your lyric sheets? And I was like, So I got with Billy Sherrill's secretary and, dictated these things. She typed them up. So after waiting for probably 30 minutes, they had these lyric sheets. And so the first song would go by and George was looking at it, and then after 20 or so seconds ago. And so I go, let's move on. Let me, here's another one. And so he did that to every song. But so we ended up doing this song called The Tavern Choir, which I didn't write. But he was always so nice. And that night I had dinner with him. He said, gosh, we're sorry we can't come to the show tomorrow. I know it's closing tomorrow, but we've got to leave in the morning, so we're not. And part of me was kind of relieved because I didn't want to have to portray him in front of him. But then that night, right before the intermission, somebody came up and said, I was backstage and said, did you see him? Did you see him? I said, well, who? I said, George, he's out there tonight. So they did come, but he didn't want to make me nervous. And then at his birthday, once at the Opry, they had this celebration for him. And so everybody was singing something, and he was sitting out in the audience on the front row. So I sang Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes, and a song I wrote as a tribute to him and Graham Parsons called The King of Broken Hearts. So that was another one of those times where when you're on stage, you can either go, I'm gonna mess up, I'm sure, or else, hey, I'm just gonna do this, And you have to, I think when you perform, you have to make that decision. Because me, personally, I'm like super sensitive on stage. If I feel like, hey, I'm bombing up here or whatever, people don't seem to be that into this or whatever, but you have to keep going. Your mind plays tricks on you, or maybe not tricks, but you can talk yourself out of doing your job sometimes. And also, it used to be when I wasn't performing a lot, it would seem like every time I'd get on stage would be so intense because I'd think, this is the one because so-and-so's out there, or this could happen, whatever. So I would put all this pressure on myself, and then it would be like a catharsis, and I'd feel like, wow, that was magic. That was really magic. And then as I started performing, though, more and more, it's like, I'm not sure if I felt the magic tonight. And so was that bad? Was that a washout, that show? But I think over time, you just find those things in your performing that you turn off those other voices and things, and it's just the music. And that's when it's going good, because I think, and that's magic.
I think that when people don't play live very often, they put way too much importance on each particular show, and it puts a weight on their shoulders that makes it so much harder for them to deal with. But when you start doing a lot of gigs, each one doesn't seem like your whole life depends on it.
Yeah.
And you get better at just and maybe that takes the top end off a little bit,
right,
where you don't get that oh my God feeling, but I believe the audience still gets it. And I think
one thing for me performing live, you might have this too, is I really like to see the audience and then kind of relate to them more that way. When it's just pitch black out there, I get kind of lost in a way. Now, the other side of that is when the lights are up and you're looking out there and people are just kind of, but I kind of equate that to, people are at home watching television or whatever. They're not looking at that TV screen. And so we are that entertainment, and people they shouldn't really feel like they've got to be like, hey, they're just sitting there. So that's another thing to kind of understand about the audiences, is that they're not there to entertain you or give it back. Sometimes they are very demonstrative, and that's a great feeling, and you do get this energy, but sometimes they're very subdued, but that's okay. Another thing is it's very fatiguing to be on the road, so sometimes when you get there to the gig and are on stage, you haven't had time to do maybe your daily rituals you do at home, and you don't have enough rest. But I think there is also, I don't know if it's your adrenaline or what, sometimes you feel too like you don't have that adrenaline. It's like, how am I I can't do this anymore. How am I gonna do it? But you just go out. I think music kind of, it gives you a different kind of energy. It's not a, overstimulated, hyped up thing, which I used to feel like you had to have, but it's just, a natural kind of thing, and when you were saying that thing about, you're thinking, wait a minute, am I bombing up here? You've probably had these shows too where you are playing, you feel like, I'm just not doing good tonight. And I know these people are gonna never come back. They're gonna be disappointed. And then they sometimes say, it's like, that's the best I've ever seen you. And you think, okay, all right.